I'm David, 47, and I've been married to Linda, 45, for 22 years. We met in college through mutual friends and got married right after graduation. Linda was my first and only serious relationship. She worked as a marketing executive while I focused on building my career in software development. Our marriage was good, or at least I thought it was, until last month when everything began to fall apart. We have 2 children, Jenny, 20, who's in her second year of college studying psychology, and Billy, 17, who's a junior in high school. The issues began about 4 months ago when Linda started going to a new gym. One evening, she casually mentioned it over dinner, saying, "I want to get in better shape before I turn 46. I'm thinking of signing up for a new gym." I could see how determined she was, so I said, "That sounds great. I'll join you if you want. It could be fun to work out together." She smiled but shook her head. "I think I want to focus on myself for this one. I'll go alone, but thanks for offering." I understood, so I supported her decision. As the weeks passed, she started going to the gym more often. At first, it was just a few times a week, but soon she was going twice a day. I didn't think much of it at the time. She seemed happier, more energetic, and I thought it was great that she was focusing on her health. But then things began to shift. One day, as she walked into the living room, I noticed she had bought all new clothes, something that stood out because she hadn't mentioned going shopping. "New clothes?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, yeah," she replied, glancing down at the clothes. "I just needed some new things for the gym. Something that'll motivate me to stick with it." I nodded, not thinking much of it. But the next few days, I started noticing more changes. She was spending a lot of time on her phone, texting and scrolling. Whenever I entered the room, though, she would quickly hide her screen or switch apps. It wasn't anything huge, but it felt like something was off. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the late nights started adding up. She'd stay at work later than usual, coming home around 9 or 10 p.m. on some nights. When she did, I'd make sure dinner was ready for her, and I'd take care of the kids so she could unwind after a long day. One evening, I couldn't help myself and asked, "You've been working really late lately. Is everything okay with your project?" She looked up from her phone, giving me a tired smile. "Yeah, it's just a big project for a new client. Lots of deadlines to hit. I'll be working late for the next week or so, but I'm fine. Don't worry." I nodded, trusting her completely. "All right, just let me know if you need anything. I've got the kids covered." But as time went on, I started feeling like there was more to it than just work. The distance between us grew, and my gut began telling me something was off. Our sex life had practically disappeared. Every time I tried to initiate intimacy, there was an excuse. "I'm too tired," she'd say. "I have a headache," or "I need to wake up early tomorrow." It went from being intimate 2 or 3 times a week to nothing at all for almost 3 months. At first, I thought it was just work stress catching up with her. She had been putting in long hours, after all, so I didn't push the issue. But as the weeks passed, I began to feel the distance between us growing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but I didn't know what. Maybe it was just a phase, I kept telling myself. Then, 3 weeks ago, on a Friday evening, I received a text from Linda. It was a bit unexpected, but the tone seemed urgent. "We need to talk. There's something important I need to discuss with you." I figured it might be about work. Maybe she'd gotten the promotion she'd been hoping for. Or perhaps she wanted to talk about our upcoming summer vacation plans, something light and positive. It had been a while since we discussed anything fun together. I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this was a conversation that would bring us closer again. That evening, the kids were both out. Jenny was at her campus library, and Billy was at football practice. The house was quiet, and I was waiting for Linda to come home, feeling oddly calm, like this was just another evening. When Linda walked in, I was surprised to see she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, tall, muscular, probably in his late 30s. He had short dark hair, a strong build, and looked out of place in our home. "Hey," Linda said, avoiding eye contact as she entered the living room. "I'd like you to meet Tyrone." I stood up from the couch, confused. "Tyrone?" I repeated, trying to mask my surprise. "Nice to meet you." He shook my hand, smiling awkwardly. "Nice to meet you too." Linda sat down on the couch next to him. I was still standing there, trying to process the situation. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice a bit sharper than I intended. "Who is this?" "This is Tyrone," Linda said again, her voice flat. "He's been helping me with some things. I thought it was time you met him." I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I looked at her, searching her face for any sign of what was really going on. This wasn't the conversation I'd been expecting. We were in the same living room where we'd celebrated our 20th anniversary just 2 years ago, and yet everything felt off. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. What kind of things, exactly? She hesitated, her gaze shifting away. We've been working together for a while now. I wanted you to meet him. There was a silence that filled the room, heavy and uncomfortable. Tyrone shifted in his seat, looking between Linda and me, but said nothing. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Everything in me screamed that something wasn't right, but I still didn't know what to say. Finally, I spoke, my voice tight with frustration. Linda, I don't understand. What's going on here? Why didn't you tell me about him before? She looked at me, her expression unreadable. I wasn't sure how to bring it up. Bring what up? I asked, my voice rising slightly. This is Tyrone, she repeated. But this time it felt like a rehearsed line. I could sense she was avoiding telling me what I needed to know. Something wasn't right, and my gut was telling me it had everything to do with the last few months. The distance, the excuses, the secrecy. The air in the room seemed to freeze as Linda dropped the bombshell. I could hardly breathe as her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'm 3 months pregnant, she said quietly, her eyes downcast as if she couldn't bear to look at me. And Tyrone is the father. I felt my entire world tilt as I processed what she had just said. What was all I could manage at first, my voice sounding distant, like I wasn't even in the room anymore. Tyrone gave a slight nod, a smug, almost pitying look on his face. He rubbed Linda's back as she spoke, as if he were comforting her. I wanted to scream at him to get out, but I couldn't move. I was frozen. Linda continued, her voice wavering. We met at the gym 8 months ago. We connected, on a deeper level than I ever did with you. I haven't been happy in our marriage for years, but I never had the courage to tell you. My chest tightened, and I swallowed hard. What are you talking about? You never said anything. We could have worked through things. I've always been here for you, supporting you. She shook her head, eyes glistening with tears. You were too focused on your work. You didn't understand my emotional needs. Tyrone does. He listens to me. He's there when I need him. I felt a surge of anger and confusion. So, you just cheated on me? For months? Behind my back? And you've been lying to me about everything? The late nights, the gym visits, everything? Linda's expression softened, but I could see the guilt there, buried beneath the surface. It wasn't just cheating, though, she said, her voice breaking. It's more than that. Tyrone and I, she looked over at him, and he gave a reassuring smile. We've fallen in love. I never meant for it to happen, but it did. And now, I want to start a new life with him. I stood there, speechless. The room was spinning, and I had to grip the back of the couch to stay upright. So all the late nights you claimed were because of work? You were with him? I asked, my voice rising as everything started to come together in my mind. Linda nodded slowly. Yes, I was with him. The gym wasn't just for working out either. We'd meet there and then go to his place. She glanced at Tyrone, who just gave me that same smug, insufferable look. I'm sorry, but I can't keep living a lie. I want to be with Tyrone. I could feel the anger rising in me, but at the same time, I felt numb, like this wasn't even my life. This couldn't be happening. I stared at Tyrone, my voice barely a whisper. How long have you two been together? 8 months, Tyrone said casually, like we were discussing the weather. It just happened. I was trembling now, struggling to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. So this is it? You're just going to walk away from our life? From everything? Linda's face contorted with guilt, but she didn't back down. I'm sorry, but I've made my choice. I turned to Tyrone, my voice trembling with disgust. And you? What kind of man are you? You knew she was married and you did this? He shrugged, the smug look never leaving his face. She's an adult. She made her own choices. I could feel my blood boiling. You've destroyed my family. You've destroyed everything. And now you're just sitting there like it's nothing? Tyrone didn't answer. He just rubbed Linda's back again, the same motion, like everything was fine. I couldn't look at them anymore. My mind was racing, my thoughts jumbled, but the one thing that stood out was the gut-wrenching realization. Linda had chosen him. You're both dead to me, I said, the words feeling like daggers as they left my mouth. I don't want to see either of you again. Linda stood up, tears welling in her eyes. I'm sorry, really, but this is what I need now. It's what I've needed for years. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them both behind, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I felt like I was trapped in a bizarre nightmare. This was the woman who had cared for me when I had pneumonia 3 years ago, the same woman who had sobbed with pride at Jenny's high school graduation. Now, here she was, sitting in our living room, telling me she was pregnant with another man's child. I could barely breathe, the weight of the betrayal crashing over me. I stood up, my voice shaky but determined. I want both of you to leave. Now, this is over. Tyrone's expression changed in an instant. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't just kick Linda out, he shouted, his voice rising. She owns half this house. I stared at him, feeling a surge of anger flood my chest. You don't get to come into my home and make demands, I spat. You've already destroyed everything. You really think I'm going to let you walk all over me? Linda stayed seated, tears streaming down her face. Please, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you, but I need to be with him. I felt my hands ball into fists. You need to be with him? After everything we've been through? After the life we built together? Tyrone sneered, crossing his arms. She's not the problem here, buddy. You're the one who couldn't keep up. I took a step toward him, my voice growing louder. I'm the problem? You think this is about me? This is about you and Linda destroying everything for a cheap fling. You have no right to be here, and neither does she. Linda looked between us, visibly shaking. I know I've hurt you, she said, her voice trembling, but you've got to understand. I've been unhappy for so long. Unhappy? I repeated, incredulous. And this is how you deal with it? Lying to me? Sneaking around? You couldn't talk to me? You couldn't ask for help? You just threw everything away. Tyrone stepped closer, his voice growing more aggressive. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm just telling you that Linda's not leaving without a fight. She's got just as much right to the house as you do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's how you're going to play this? I snapped. You think I'm going to let you manipulate me like this? After everything? Linda stood up now, tears in her eyes, but her voice was cold. I'm not here to fight either, but you need to understand. I've already made my choice. I'm with Tyrone now. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I felt the room close in, my mind spinning with everything she had just said. I turned to Tyrone, my voice low but filled with rage. Get out of my house. You're not welcome here. Tyrone glared at me, a sneer twisting his lips. Fine, but don't think this is over. We'll see who really has the power here. I don't care about your power. I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. Just get out of my life. Both of you. I stood my ground, refusing to let Tyrone's words shake me. You think you can intimidate me? I said, my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. This is still my house, and you need to leave. Tyrone's posture stiffened. He took a step forward, his chest puffing up as he closed the space between us. You better man up and accept that Linda found someone better than you, he said, his tone mocking. You can't just throw her out like this. She owns half your assets, remember? I held his gaze, forcing myself to remain calm. I'm filing for divorce first thing Monday morning, I said, my words steady. And you both need to leave my house. Now. Tyrone stepped closer, his face inches from mine. His breath was hot, and his eyes were full of fury. You don't get to make the decisions anymore, he sneered. You think you can just mess with Linda and her baby? You'd better watch yourself. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, a wave of unease washing over me. Something about the way he said it made my stomach churn. I had to keep my cool. I subtly reached for my phone, slipping it behind a couch cushion, starting to record. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I couldn't afford to lose my head. I'm not messing with anyone, I said, trying to sound as firm as possible. I'm asking you both to leave. Tyrone didn't back down. His face twisted in anger, and without warning, he reached for his waistband. My pulse quickened as he pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at my chest. If you make things difficult for Linda in this divorce, he said, his voice low and threatening, you'll regret it. I froze, my mind racing. He was serious. I know where you work, Tyrone continued, his voice like gravel. I know where your kids go to school. And accidents happen all the time, don't they? The gun in his hand felt too real. I could barely breathe. I had to think fast, get out of this without making him escalate. My mind raced, but I kept my voice calm. You're making a mistake, I said quietly, trying not to provoke him. You're not going to get away with this. Tyrone's eyes narrowed, and he took a step back, the gun still aimed at me. You're the one who's making a mistake if you don't get in line. Linda and I are starting our life now. Don't get in the way. I could barely hear the words over the pounding in my ears, but I knew I had to play this right. I couldn't let him control the situation any longer. Slowly, I took a step back, keeping my hands visible, showing no signs of aggression. My phone was still recording. Just leave, I repeated, my voice unwavering. Now. Linda just stood there, her face empty, not saying a word while Tyrone threatened me with a gun. The silence between us felt deafening as Tyrone's words rang in my ears. He was towering over me, the weapon still pointed at my chest. Linda didn't even flinch. She didn't try to stop him, didn't act surprised or scared. She just stood there, her expression completely blank, like she was watching some distant, irrelevant scene unfold. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Linda, what the hell is happening? I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. But she didn't respond. She just stared at the ground. Tyrone's voice cut through the silence. You don't get to make the decisions anymore. Linda's mine now, he said, his tone venomous. I tried again, my frustration rising. Linda, is this really happening? Are you really letting him do this? Still, nothing. She didn't say a word. As Tyrone finally backed toward the door, he threw one last taunting look at me. This is just the beginning. You won't be able to stop what's coming. I watched them leave, Linda trailing behind Tyrone without a second glance back at me. As soon as the door slammed shut, I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking, but I called the police immediately, showing them the recording. They have a gun, I said, my voice barely holding together. He threatened me. They need to be arrested. The officer nodded as he watched the video. We'll take care of it. Stay here and stay safe. That night, Tyrone was arrested for making criminal threats with a deadly weapon. Linda was also taken into custody for being complicit. They were both released on bail the following morning. When the kids came home, they saw the police cars outside the house. Jenny's face immediately crumpled when she saw me. What happened, Dad? She asked, her voice small. I knelt down, trying to steady myself. Jenny, I need to tell you something, okay? Something happened with Mom and a man named Tyrone. He threatened me with a gun. Her eyes widened in shock. What do you mean, threatened you? I sighed, my throat tight. He came to the house tonight with Mom, and he pointed a gun at me. He said if I tried to make things difficult for your mom, I'd regret it. I've already called the police, and they've arrested him. Jenny's eyes filled with tears, and she broke down, her sobs filling the silence in the room. I don't understand. Why would Mom let him do that? I pulled her into a hug, trying to offer comfort, but it didn't seem to help. I don't know, Jenny, but we're going to be okay. We'll get through this together. Billy walked in just as Jenny was crying, his fists clenched at his sides. He took one look at me and stormed off to his room. A few moments later, I heard a loud crash, followed by the sound of Billy punching a hole in the wall. I ran to his room, knocking on the door. Billy, please open up. He didn't respond, so I gently pushed the door open. He was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, his face red with anger. The hole in the wall was large, the drywall cracked and crumbling. Billy, I know you're angry, but we're going to get through this, I said, my voice calm but firm. I need you to talk to me. He didn't look at me. How could she do this? How could Mom let him do that to you? I sat down beside him, my heart breaking for him. I don't know, Billy. I don't understand either. But we're not alone in this. We're a family, and we'll stick together, no matter what. Billy didn't say anything for a long time, his eyes focused on the hole in the wall. Finally, he looked at me, his expression softening just a bit. I don't want you to go through this alone, Dad. I put my arm around him, pulling him close. You're not alone, Billy. We'll face this together. I promise you. We're going to get through this. For the next 2 days, Billy stayed in his room, refusing to come out. I didn't push him. I let him have his space, knowing he needed time to process everything. I kept telling him we would get through this together, and eventually, he came out, the tension in his shoulders slightly eased. Dad, I'm sorry, he said quietly, standing in the doorway of the living room. I didn't know what to do. I smiled, though I could see how much pain he was still carrying. It's okay, Billy. We're going to be okay. We've got each other. Jenny had been quieter than usual, but after a few days, she seemed to be doing better. She even went to school the next day, though I could tell she was still processing everything. I kept reminding them both that we would get through this, and for the first time in a while, I started to believe it myself. My phone was ringing off the hook. It was my parents and Linda's parents, all calling one after the other. I ignored most of them, but finally, I answered Linda's mom's call. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello, it's Brenda," she said, her voice soft but insistent. "I've been trying to reach you. What's going on? Why are you doing this to Linda?" I sighed, leaning back against the kitchen counter. "Brenda, I'm not trying to do anything to Linda. She's the one who chose to do this. She's the one who let someone threaten me with a gun in front of our kids. But she's pregnant," Brenda exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. "She's under a lot of stress, and you know how difficult this divorce must be for her. You can't just press charges. Think about the baby." I closed my eyes, trying to control my emotions. "I've thought about everything, believe me. I didn't want any of this, but she chose this path. She's not a victim here, Brenda. She's the one who made these choices. She said you were emotionally distant, that you didn't understand her," Brenda continued, her voice pleading. "She felt trapped in the marriage. I'm sorry she feels that way, but I didn't deserve any of this," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm not going to let her manipulate me into dropping charges. She needs to face the consequences for what she did." There was a long pause, and then Brenda's voice softened. "Please, just think about it. For the baby's sake." "I can't, Brenda," I replied, shaking my head even though she couldn't see me. "I have to protect myself and the kids. We're going through enough as it is." After hanging up, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mom. "Did you hear from Linda's parents?" she demanded as soon as I picked up. "Yeah, they're calling me nonstop, telling me to drop the charges," I said, rubbing my forehead. "What? No way. You need to hold your ground. She put you and the kids through hell," my mom snapped. "You can't let her get away with this. You need to go after everything in the divorce. Don't let her have anything." "I'm not letting her walk away with a free pass," I said, my voice determined. "I filed for divorce this morning, and my lawyer says the recording will be crucial for both the criminal case and the divorce." "Good," my mom said, sounding pleased. "She needs to pay for what she did. You've been through enough. It's time she faces the consequences." "I'm doing what I need to do, Mom," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "For the kids and for me." "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "You're doing the right thing. Just make sure she doesn't get away with this." I hung up, the conversation lingering in my mind. My parents were fully on my side, and while Linda's parents were pushing for me to back off, I knew there was no turning back. I was done protecting her. The damage was done, and now it was time to focus on rebuilding. Linda's attempts to reach me have been relentless. Her calls and texts come in at all hours of the day, each one more desperate than the last. I glance at my phone and see another message from her. "Please, can we talk? I made a terrible mistake. Tyrone manipulated me. I didn't know he had a gun, and I never wanted to hurt you. Please, I need you to believe me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Can we fix this? I want to fix this. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." I can't bring myself to respond, not anymore. Every time I read her words, I feel my blood boil and my heart break. She's the same woman who betrayed me, who stood by silently while Tyrone pointed a gun at me, and now she wants me to believe that she's the victim? I don't know if I'm more angry or heartbroken. I've blocked her number, but she finds ways to contact me, through emails, voicemails, and even through mutual friends. I keep telling myself that I'm doing the right thing by cutting ties, by putting up these walls, but the guilt still gnaws at me. Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me wants to think that maybe this is a huge mistake, that deep down, she regrets everything. But then I think of the gun, the way she stood there without a word of protest, and I know deep down that this was no mistake. She made a choice, and now she has to live with it. I've told her time and again that she needs to communicate through our lawyers, but she doesn't listen. I get another text, another plea for understanding, and I have to fight the urge to read it. Meanwhile, the kids are struggling more than I imagined. Jenny, who's always been strong, has been keeping her distance from me, but I can see the pain in her eyes every time she looks at me. I know she's hurting for me, but mostly for herself. She still hasn't forgiven Linda, and I don't know if she ever will. I don't think any of us will ever forgive her. Jenny told me just yesterday that she can't even look at her mother the same way anymore. Jenny came in and started crying. "How could she do that, Dad? How could she do that to us?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "You were everything to her. You were her whole world. And then, this?" I had no answer for her. No explanation for why Linda made the choices she did. No words to ease the hurt that I knew was deep inside her. All I could do was hold her, remind her that we were going to be okay, that we would rebuild. even if it felt impossible right now. Billy, on the other hand, is spiraling in his own way. I can see the anger bubbling up inside him, the frustration of being stuck in a situation he didn't ask for, a life that doesn't make sense anymore. His grades have plummeted, and his behavior has gotten worse. Just last week, his football coach called me. Billy's been getting into a lot of fights at practice. I don't know what's going on with him, but this isn't like him. He's always been a solid player, but now it seems like he's got a chip on his shoulder. Is everything okay at home? I told the coach we were going through some family issues, that Billy was struggling with everything that had happened. I wasn't sure if he was buying it, but it didn't matter. The truth was, Billy didn't know how to express the pain he was feeling, so he lashed out. He threw punches instead of words. I spoke to Billy and he said, "I don't care about football anymore, Dad." He told me when I asked him about practice. "What's the point? Mom's gone, and everything's a mess. I can't focus on anything." I tried to explain that football could be his outlet, a way to channel his anger, but he wasn't interested. It hurt to see him like this, the once passionate kid about sports now detached and angry. He's failing 2 classes, and I can see it's only getting worse. Billy's always been the type to keep his emotions bottled up, but now I can see them spilling over in ways that worry me. At the same time, I know I need to be there for him, even if he's pushing me away. I keep telling him we're a team, that we'll figure this out together. But I can feel the distance growing, and I'm scared that if I don't reach him soon, it might be too late. I couldn't help myself last night. I found myself sitting alone in the living room, staring at the walls, the place that once felt like home. My eyes fell on our wedding photos, those glossy images of a younger, happier couple. We were so full of hope, full of dreams. I remember the day we said our vows, how genuine Linda's smile was as we stood in front of our friends and family. She was everything I ever wanted, beautiful, kind, my partner, my love. Now, that all feels like a lifetime ago. Looking at those photos, I couldn't help but feel a wave of bitterness and anger flood over me. 22 years of marriage, gone. All because she couldn't keep her legs closed. That's the harsh truth. She betrayed me with Tyrone. Not once, but repeatedly, and now my world is in pieces. Every picture, every memory, feels tainted now. What was supposed to be a lifetime of love and trust has turned into a nightmare I never saw coming. I've spent so many nights in disbelief, trying to piece together the timeline of everything. How long had she been lying to me? How long had I been a fool, believing that our marriage was solid when all along, she was sneaking around with him? She said she was unhappy, but why didn't she talk to me? Why didn't she tell me she needed something more? Instead, she hid behind her work and her trips to the gym, meeting Tyrone in secret, lying to my face every day. I wish she had just told me the truth. Maybe we could have worked through it, maybe not, but at least I would have had the chance to try. Instead, I was left blindsided. The worst part, though, was the night Tyrone pulled that gun on me. I remember it like it was yesterday. His smug expression, Linda standing there, not even reacting when he pointed the weapon at my chest. In my own house, where my kids have grown up, where they've had birthday parties, where we've celebrated anniversaries and holidays. There were pictures of them on the walls, the images of their childhoods frozen in time. And now, they'll forever be reminders of how Linda chose another man over her family, over us. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the fear. That was the first time in my life I felt true fear in my own home, where I should have felt safe. Tyrone's words echo in my mind even now. If you try to make this difficult for Linda in the divorce, you'll regret it. Accidents happen all the time. I can still see the glint of the gun in his hand. I wasn't scared just for myself. I was scared for my kids, for the safety of our home, for the life I had worked so hard to build. It felt like my whole world was crashing down in that moment. I don't regret filing charges. Not for a second. Nobody, not even Linda or her new boyfriend, gets to threaten me in my own home. I don't care what she's going through, what stress she's under, or how much Tyrone has manipulated her. I will not let them get away with this. They can try to make excuses all they want, but they crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. She betrayed me, she betrayed our kids, and now she has to face the consequences. Next week, I have to face her in court. I'll be sitting across from her, probably with Tyrone by her side, and I don't know what I'm going to say to her. The anger I feel is still so raw. I still have moments where I want to scream at her, ask her how she could do this to us. How could she betray me like this? In front of our kids, in front of everything we built together. But I also know that I have to stay focused. I have to stay strong, for myself, for the kids, for our future. Because no matter what happens in court, I'm determined to move forward, to rebuild, and to make sure my kids don't carry the weight of this betrayal for the rest of their lives. 2 weeks have passed since the threat case hearing, and the memories of that day still feel fresh. I arrived at the courthouse early with my lawyer, trying to keep my mind clear and focused. The cold air outside didn't help calm the storm brewing inside me. I was tense, anxious, but resolute. This wasn't just a court case for me. It was about sending a message that I wouldn't back down, that I wouldn't let her manipulate the situation, and that she couldn't just walk away from the mess she made. When I walked into the courthouse, I saw them. Linda and Tyrone. They walked in together, both dressed sharply, like they were headed to church or some family event. Linda was trying to look composed, but I could see it in her face. She was nervous, unsure. Tyrone had that smug look on his face again, like he was the king of the world. It made my blood boil just to look at him. I could feel Linda's eyes on me as she glanced over, trying to catch my attention. She wanted to see if I'd react, if I'd show any sign of weakness. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I focused on my phone, pretending to scroll through messages, ignoring the tension building between us. I wasn't going to give her the power to get inside my head again. Not after everything she'd put me through. Their lawyer was smooth, slick in his expensive suit, and he wasted no time trying to paint me as the villain in this whole situation. He stood up confidently, adjusted his cufflinks, and immediately began his spiel. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," he began, looking directly at me with a calculated glare. "This man, Mr. Baker, has been controlling and emotionally abusive to his wife for years. He has threatened to leave her homeless and penniless, all for his own benefit. He has emotionally manipulated her into this corner." I could feel my blood pressure rise as his words dripped with falsehoods, but I stayed calm. I knew this was coming. I had to trust my lawyer and the evidence we had. The lawyer went on, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "Tyrone, here, was simply trying to protect Linda. He only showed the gun because he feared for her safety in what was a volatile and emotionally charged situation." My lawyer, who had been sitting quietly until then, stood up and smiled, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording that speaks for itself." I braced myself for the moment. The courtroom fell silent as the recording began to play. I could hear the voices so clearly, Tyrone's threats, the menace in his voice. "If you try to make this difficult for Linda, you'll regret it." The words hung in the air, thick with the tension of that night. But the most damning part was Linda's silence. There she was, sitting beside Tyrone, and you could hear her not saying a word. She didn't speak up when Tyrone pulled out the gun. She didn't try to stop him. She didn't try to protect me or herself. She just stood there, silent. The faces of Tyrone and his lawyer went white. The smugness that had been all over Tyrone's face earlier in the day vanished. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Linda's expression was one of shock, maybe because she realized she couldn't spin this anymore. The judge, who had been sitting quietly during the recording, suddenly leaned forward, her face tight with anger. "This is serious, Mr. Tyrone's last name, Ms. Linda's last name. You've crossed a line here, and there will be consequences." The judge turned to the bench and quickly scribbled something down. "I'm issuing a restraining order immediately. Both of you are to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Your Name, his home, and his workplace." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, a small victory, but I knew it wasn't over yet. The judge looked at us, her voice firm. "A trial date has been set for next month. You'll have your day in court, but make no mistake, this is serious." As my lawyer gave me a nod, signaling that the first part of this battle was over, I thought that was going to be the biggest development of the day. The restraining order, the trial date, it all felt like steps in the right direction. But as I walked out of the courtroom, my phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer. I opened it, and the message sent a chill down my spine. "Something has changed," it said. "We need to meet. Urgent." I stood there in shock for a few moments, trying to wrap my head around what she had just said. Nancy, Tyrone's wife, standing on my doorstep with a folder full of information that was about to turn everything I thought I knew upside down. My mind raced, the weight of what she was saying sinking in slowly. "Tyrone's married?" I asked, still struggling to process the news. Nancy nodded, her face a mixture of pain and anger. She looked like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for a long time. "Yes, I've been married to him for 13 years. We have 3 kids, 12, 9, and 6. And I've been living a lie for far too long." She handed me the folder, and I opened it to find documents, photos, and detailed records. She started to explain as I flipped through the papers. I found out about Linda and the pregnancy when I saw Tyrone's arrest report in the paper, Nancy said, her voice trembling with emotion. I've been suspicious for a while. Tyrone's been distant, and the excuses, the late nights, the sudden trips for work, but I never thought he could be capable of this. When I saw that report, something clicked, and I started digging. I looked at the evidence in front of me, and what I was seeing confirmed some of my worst fears. Nancy had discovered that Tyrone had a pattern. He had done this before. 2 years ago, at his previous job, Tyrone had been involved with another woman. He'd gotten her pregnant and, just like with Linda, disappeared when she was 7 months along. The woman had to move back in with her parents, raising the child alone, with no support from Tyrone. It was like a mirror image of what was happening now, only this time, there was the added layer of the gun threat and the chaos it caused in my life. I didn't know what else to do, Nancy continued, her voice breaking. I couldn't just let him get away with it again, leaving a woman in the same position. And then, when I found out about Linda, I knew I had to confront you. I looked up at her, feeling a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Why are you telling me all this? Nancy wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. Because I want you to know what kind of man Tyrone is. He's been playing this game for years, using women and then abandoning them when things get tough. I don't want you to think that you're the only one he's done this to. You deserve to know the truth, and I didn't want to see him destroy another family. As I absorbed the gravity of her words, everything about Tyrone's behavior, his smugness in court, his casual attitude toward threatening me, suddenly made sense. He wasn't just a guy who made a mistake. He was someone with a history of manipulating and leaving women behind when things got complicated. I'm so sorry for what you've been through, I said, genuinely feeling for her. But thank you for coming to me with this. This changes everything. Nancy nodded, her face full of regret and resignation. I'm not asking for anything from you, except that you know what you're dealing with. I want him to pay for what he's done, and I want him to stop doing this to people. I sat down on the couch, overwhelmed by the weight of the information she had just dropped on me. The divorce, the criminal case, the kids, it all seemed like too much to carry. But now, with this new revelation, I realized I wasn't the only one Tyrone had hurt, and it wasn't just me who had to deal with his betrayal. Nancy stayed for a while longer, explaining the details of Tyrone's past, and then she left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the shocking evidence in my hands. I knew this was going to change everything in the court case, but I wasn't sure how to use it yet. All I knew was that Tyrone's past was catching up with him, and I wasn't going to let him get away with any of it. My hands shook as I scrolled through the text messages that Nancy had brought. The conversations between Tyrone and Linda were a revelation, each message more shocking than the last. They weren't just having an affair. They were scheming, plotting, and using me as a pawn in their game. I stared at the screen, reading through the messages. It was sickening. Tyrone and Linda had been planning this for months, carefully orchestrating their moves like they were setting up a chessboard. They'd been in constant communication, sharing their plans for the divorce and how they could secure the majority of my assets. Nancy pointed to a series of messages. This is where it starts to get really bad. Look at this one from Tyrone to Linda, she said, her voice tight with disgust. I read aloud from one of the messages. We need to keep pushing his buttons, make him snap. If he does something stupid, we can paint him as the abusive husband. That's how we win this. We'll get the money and get him out of the way. My stomach churned. They had been deliberately provoking me, trying to get a reaction from me, trying to make me look violent or unstable in front of the court. And from the looks of it, they were playing a long game. Another message showed Linda responding. We need to make sure we stay calm, no matter what happens. Once he gets angry enough, we'll have him right where we want him. We need the house, the car, the kids' college funds. Everything. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They had actually planned to manipulate me into taking the bait. They wanted me to react in a way that would make me look like a danger to my own family, so they could take everything from me. Nancy continued pointing to other texts, each one more revealing than the last. Make sure he feels abandoned. If he starts questioning you, act like you're not interested anymore. We can convince him you want out and that this whole thing is his fault. I dropped my phone into my lap, feeling the weight of their betrayal hit me harder than ever. It wasn't just about cheating. It was about them using me as a tool to get what they wanted. The manipulation, the lies. It was all carefully calculated. They weren't just ruining my marriage. They were trying to destroy me financially and emotionally. Nancy looked at me, her face full of frustration and regret. I never knew how deep it went. When I saw these messages, I realized how much of a game they were playing. Tyrone has done this before, and now he's doing it again. But he's not going to get away with it this time. I nodded, my mind racing. I had already been dealing with so much, but now I understood the true extent of what they had been doing. The recording, the gun threat, the lies. It was all part of their plan to manipulate me, to get me to act irrationally. I didn't know what to do with this information yet, but I knew one thing for sure. They had underestimated me. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me without a fight. I had already filed for divorce, but now I had the upper hand. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage. I was fighting to protect my family and my future. We have to use this, I said to Nancy, my voice steady with newfound resolve. This changes everything. We'll expose them for who they really are. No one is going to believe their lies when we show what they've been planning. Nancy nodded, her expression softening a little. I'm with you. Tyrone needs to face the consequences of what he's done, and I want to make sure that no one else gets hurt by him again. Linda and Tyrone had been scheming for months. The text showed that the gun threat wasn't something that happened on the spot. It was calculated. Tyrone had written, "When we break the news, I'll bring my peace. If he reacts aggressively, I'll intimidate him a bit. That way, he'll back off from fighting the divorce and you'll get everything." Linda replied, "Perfect plan, babe. He's such a coward. He'll probably just cry." I handed all the evidence to my lawyer in the DA's office. Now, the DA is considering adding conspiracy charges to the existing threats charge. Once Linda found out about the new evidence, she began calling me nonstop, crying and claiming she didn't know Tyrone was married. She said he had manipulated her into going along with the whole plan. But the texts paint a different picture. She knew all about his wife and kids. She even joked about being the other woman and mocked how Nancy was too clueless to notice the affair. Things took another turn when Jenny was looking for old family photos in Linda's drawer and discovered a second phone, one I never knew about. There were messages on it dating back almost a year. Linda and Tyrone had been planning this for months, even before Linda dropped the pregnancy bomb. They had specifically waited until Linda was visibly showing, thinking I wouldn't fight back as hard if there was a baby involved. The impact on our kids has been devastating. Billy barely leaves his room except for school. He's failing 3 classes now, and his football coach called to say he's been sitting out practices, just watching from the bleachers. Jenny is angry all the time. She told Linda in a text message that she never wants to see her again and that she's dead to her. Linda's response was just, "You'll understand when you're older and fall in love." After I sent Linda's parents copies of the text messages, they showed up at my house. They were horrified. Linda's father, who had been defending her actions and urging me to drop the charges, broke down crying in my living room. He kept repeating that he didn't raise his daughter to be this kind of person. They've since stopped taking her calls. My lawyer says that with this new evidence, Linda won't get much in the divorce. The conspiracy to threaten me and the premeditated nature of their plan will work against her in the property division. But honestly, I don't care about the money anymore. I just want her out of our lives. The woman in those text messages isn't the person I married. She's a stranger who spent months plotting to destroy me while sleeping in our bed and sharing meals with our family. Jenny asked me yesterday if I ever suspected anything. The truth is, I didn't. I trusted Linda completely, even when she was going to the gym twice a day, working late, and stopped wanting to be intimate. I never imagined she would do this. 22 years of marriage, and I never once checked her phone or questioned her late nights. Now, I realize she was laughing at my trust, calling me a fool with her lover. It's been a month since the divorce proceedings began last week, and things have taken several unexpected turns. I need to share what's happened because it's almost unbelievable. The hearing started with Linda trying to play the victim. She claimed Tyrone had manipulated and coerced her into their scheme. Her lawyer presented a sob story about how she was a vulnerable woman trapped in an emotionally distant marriage and how Tyrone took advantage of her loneliness. She even brought in a colleague from work to testify about how she would cry in the break room about our supposedly troubled marriage. But her act completely fell apart after what happened at the criminal trial. Tyrone, facing serious jail time for the gun threat, decided to take the plea deal offered by the DA. 2 years of probation and a restraining order in exchange for testifying about their conspiracy. He took the deal, and what he revealed in court changed everything. During his plea hearing, Tyrone completely turned on Linda. He admitted that the entire scheme had been her idea from the start. Linda had spotted him at the gym, recognized him from his social media profiles, and immediately took an interest in him because of his success as a real estate agent. It wasn't Tyrone who had approached Linda. She approached him first. He also confirmed that Linda knew he was married from the start, having researched his Facebook profile and seen clear pictures of his family, including his wife and children. According to Tyrone, Linda had confided in him about her unhappiness in our marriage, how she felt emotionally distant from me, and how she was planning to leave. However, what was most chilling was her primary focus, getting the best possible settlement in the divorce. Linda hadn't just wanted out of our marriage. She had been calculating and manipulative, setting her sights on getting as much as possible in the split. She had told Tyrone that she needed someone who could intimidate me and push me into submission. That's when she targeted Tyrone. She had chosen him specifically because of his tough guy persona and the fact that he had a concealed carry permit. Tyrone described how Linda had spun the narrative that she needed someone who could handle a man like me, someone who wouldn't hesitate to use force if necessary. Linda's manipulation of Tyrone's vulnerability played out as she painted herself as the victim in a marriage gone wrong, convincing him to play a pivotal role in threatening me. Tyrone had been just another pawn in her game, but now he was exposing her as the mastermind behind their twisted plan. This revelation hit like a bombshell in court. Tyrone's admission was the final piece that cemented Linda's role in the conspiracy to threaten me and manipulate the divorce proceedings. With this new information, it was clear she wasn't just the victim of her own bad choices. She had masterminded a scheme to destroy me and my family. The gun threat had been Linda's idea from the start. She thought it would make it appear as if I were the one in the wrong, hoping that when I inevitably reacted violently to being threatened, it would paint me as the abusive husband in front of everyone. Linda had calculated every move in the plot, carefully orchestrating it all to make me look guilty and to secure her own financial gain in the divorce. But the biggest bombshell came when the paternity test results were presented in court. Linda was, in fact, pregnant, but not by Tyrone. The baby belonged to her personal trainer, a 25-year-old guy named Chad, whom she had been seeing behind both Tyrone's and my back. Apparently, while she was plotting with Tyrone, she was also sleeping with Chad during her gym sessions, using the opportunity to further betray not only me but also Tyrone. The courtroom went silent when the test results were revealed. Tyrone, already reeling from his own betrayal and involvement in the plot, completely lost it. He jumped out of his seat, fists clenched, screaming at Linda. "You ruined my marriage for nothing," he yelled, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "I did all of this for you, and you were sleeping with someone else the entire time?" The tension in the room was palpable. Linda sat there, expressionless, as the reality of her lies and manipulation came crashing down around her. Tyrone's face turned red, his frustration boiling over, as he yelled at Linda, demanding answers. But Linda remained silent, offering no defense for her actions. Tyrone's outburst left everyone in the courtroom shocked and uncomfortable, as it was clear that he, too, had been manipulated in the worst way possible. The revelation about the baby only added to the complexity of the case. Not only had Linda been plotting with Tyrone to destroy me, but she had also been carrying on an affair with Chad, exposing her utter disregard for loyalty and honesty. The shockwaves of this discovery reverberated throughout the entire courtroom, leaving Linda's character completely shattered. Tyrone had been under the impression that Linda was planning to divorce me, take half my assets, and then marry him. He thought he had a chance at a new life with her, one where they could start fresh, away from the mess of her current marriage. But the bombshell revelation that Linda had been sleeping with Chad the entire time shattered that illusion. Tyrone's reaction was explosive. He jumped up, fists clenched, and began shouting at Linda, his face twisted with fury. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable, and the judge had to call for order. In the end, Tyrone's best friends, or BFFs, had to physically remove him from the courtroom, his rage making it impossible for him to stay. Meanwhile, Chad, who had been subpoenaed to testify, arrived at the hearing looking as confused as anyone else. He had no idea Linda was married. She had told him she was divorced and even made up elaborate lies about her life. Linda had introduced him to her children, Jenny and Billy, as her niece and nephew during a visit to the gym. She had painted herself as a woman who had left her abusive ex-husband and was now living independently. Chad, clearly shocked by the turn of events, presented a series of text messages that painted a very different picture of Linda's intentions. In the messages, Linda had invited Chad to move in with her after she finalized her divorce from me. She promised him that once everything was settled, she and Chad could start their lives together, free from the complications of her past. In one particularly telling message, she told Chad, "Once this is all over, we can finally be together, just the two of us. You and me. I'll have the house to myself, and everything will be perfect." Chad seemed genuinely stunned by the entire situation. He didn't know Linda was still married, and hearing how deep her manipulation ran only added to his confusion. But he couldn't deny the text messages he presented, which showed just how far Linda had gone to deceive not only me, but Tyrone and Chad as well. The revelation that Linda had been lying to everyone and playing multiple people against each other left the entire courtroom speechless. Tyrone's outburst was just the beginning of the fallout, and it was clear that Linda's web of lies had caught up with her in the worst possible way. This revelation shattered what little credibility Linda had left. Her own lawyer looked disgusted. The judge called for a recess, and when we returned, Linda had a complete meltdown. She began crying about how everyone was against her and how she was just trying to find happiness. The judge, however, was not impressed. Meanwhile, Linda's professional life has completely fallen apart. Her company discovered the criminal charges and conspiracy during a background check for a promotion, which flagged the court cases. They fired her immediately, citing their zero-tolerance policy for criminal behavior. She's been unable to find another job in marketing since the story has spread throughout our professional network. Linda has moved in with her sister because she can no longer afford an apartment. She keeps trying to contact the kids, sending long emails expressing how sorry she is and asking for their support during her pregnancy. Jenny responded once, telling her that she hoped the baby would grow up to betray her just like she betrayed us. Billy still won't acknowledge her existence. The one positive development is that Billy has started talking again. His grades are still poor, but he's seeing a therapist twice a week and making progress. The therapist says his anger issues are understandable given the circumstances, and we're working on healthier ways for him to express his feelings. The divorce proceedings are moving quickly now. The judge has reviewed all the evidence. The text messages planning the conspiracy, the paternity test results proving Tyrone isn't the father, and the testimony about Linda's multiple affairs. My lawyer says we'll likely wrap everything up within a month. Linda's sister called me yesterday to warn me that Linda isn't handling any of this well. She's been drinking heavily despite the pregnancy and complaining about how everyone has abandoned her when she needs them most. I almost felt sorry for her until I remembered the text messages where she joked about using Tyrone's gun to scare me. 6 months have passed since this nightmare began, and I can finally say it's over. The divorce was finalized last month. The judge awarded me the house and primary custody of Billy. Jenny is an adult, so custody wasn't an issue. Linda got nothing except her personal belongings and her car. The judge cited her conspiracy with Tyrone and her multiple deceptions as the reason for the uneven split. Linda's life has completely unraveled. She lost the baby at 5 months due to complications. Her sister informed me that Linda had been drinking heavily throughout the pregnancy despite multiple warnings. Chad, the personal trainer who was the actual father, wants nothing to do with her. When he learned about her lies and the conspiracy with Tyrone, he quit his job at the gym and moved to another city. Tyrone's wife, Nancy, divorced him and got full custody of their kids. He moved to Arizona after losing his real estate license due to the criminal charges. Last I heard, he's working as a bartender and telling anyone who will listen about how Linda ruined his life. Linda's downward spiral hit rock bottom last week when she showed up at our house at 2 a.m. completely drunk. She was screaming in the driveway about how she had lost everything because of one mistake. She kept saying she would do anything to fix things and come home. The neighbors called the police before I could, and since she violated the restraining order, she spent 2 days in jail. Her sister refused to bail her out, saying Linda needed to face consequences for once in her life. The kids are doing better. Jenny is back at college and seeing the campus counselor regularly. She's joined a support group for children of divorced parents and says it's helping her process everything. Billy's grades have improved to B's and C's, and he's back on the football team. His therapist says his anger issues have gotten much better now that he's learned some coping mechanisms. Linda's parents have been surprisingly supportive throughout all of this. They've maintained a relationship with the kids while completely cutting contact with Linda. Her mom comes over every Sunday to cook dinner for us, just like she did when Linda and I were first married. Her dad helped Billy fix the hole he punched in his bedroom wall and takes him fishing on some weekends. I've started dating someone I met through a mutual friend. Lisa, 43, is a high school teacher who went through her own divorce 3 years ago. We're taking things very slowly. The kids met her last month and seem to like her, especially since she tutored Billy in English and helped improve his grade. She understands our situation and isn't pushing for more than I'm ready to give. Yesterday, Linda called me from a new number. She said she's been sobered for 2 weeks and attending AA meetings. She asked if I would consider giving her another chance. I hung up without responding and blocked the number. Some betrayals can't be undone. The kids still struggle with what happened, but we're healing. Jenny told me last week that she's proud of how I've handled everything, staying strong for them while not letting Linda manipulate her way back into our lives. Billy asked if he could change his last name to mine once he turns 18. Life isn't perfect, but we're moving forward. Linda made her choices, and now she has to live with them. I have no regrets about how I handled things. Sometimes, the hardest part of being a parent is showing your kids that it's okay to cut toxic people out of your life, even if that person is their mother. We're building a new normal, and for the first time in months, I'm genuinely excited about the future.